he is. Craig, is it Movember? There's Craig Stobo joining us now. I can see him, and he can't talk to me yet. Have you got another problem with? I can't hear him at the moment. Can I hear Craig? Can I hear you?
I can hear you.
Oh, good. I can hear you now. Good on you.
Okay, good. Testing 1,
what
2,
happened
3.
to Move? Have you? Look, what a fine moustache! I haven't seen you for a long time. Look at that. How long did it take you to grow that, mate?
2 weeks.
Yeah. Is it permanent or is it temporary or is it what?
So I had a bet with myself when LGFA did the deal with the government on financing local water done well, the water CCOs. Yeah. Great deal, great outcome for the sector. I'll grow a mow and I'll shave it off when we do our first water loan to a council-owned water CCO. So there we go.
Whoa. So there's no, I suppose it is a charity, isn't it? Good on you, mate. Looks good. All right, brilliant. All right, I'm sorry to, you see, when you see somebody that you've known for a long time and you always knew they was clean shaven, God, what next? It'll be a beard. All right, now, a couple of things, mate. There's an awful lot of talk around, and certainly the left media of this country are trying, it seems, to massage public opinion to accept a capital gains tax. The last person that's been highlighted on this is the ANZ boss, Antonia Watson, over her support for a capital gains tax as well. Christopher Luxon, the Prime Minister, has been trying to hose down such speculation. But I have to say, if the mainstream media and all the commentators had their way, you'd think one would be coming tomorrow, including the news that the IRD is in actual fact exploring it. Your thoughts, mate?
Yeah, so I know Antonia, and you can listen carefully to what she said. She's referring, I think, to our current capital gains tax regime, which is if the purpose of you buying an asset is to sell it, or you're in the business of trading, you're caught by existing capital gains. But I think what she really meant was a comprehensive capital gains tax. And I referred to your listeners last week, the Michael Cullen chaired tax working group, which finished its findings in 2020 before he passed away, bless his departed soul. And that came up with a number of views on extending our capital gains tax regime. I just want to go through a few of these things because, unfortunately, the debate's in the aspiration space. It's not in the detail space. And capital gains taxes are all about the detail. So you recall that the objectives of our tax system are to be fair and efficient. So we need to collect tax efficiently. We don't want to pay bureaucrats going and knocking on doors to collect our tax. We also use it as a means of redistribution, and that's pretty clear in the marginal tax rates we pay. And thirdly, it's an instrument to try and influence behaviour. Okay, so that's the principles. So in that tax working group report, the types of assets that would be taxed under a comprehensive capital gains tax, their proposals were all land and improvements except the family home, all gains from shares, all intangible property and all business assets. Okay, so it's comprehensive, there's no leakage. The difficulties are the detail. So on day one, you have a valuation day. So the nation sets its valuation for its assets today. Well, how do you value some of those things? What do we do with Maori assets? There's no adjustment for inflation. So in the last 2 years, capital gains tax gains would have been enormous just based on inflation alone for some assets. You'll be taxed at your marginal tax rate. What about rollover treatment when your property transfers to, say, someone else in the trust or adjacent to a trust, for example? Do they have to pay the tax on that rollover? And then there's a bunching effect. If I get a capital gain and I'm pushed into a higher marginal tax rate, is that fair? And also, and not talked about, is capital losses. So if we have a capital loss, does the IRD give me a refund or ability to deduct that for tax reasons? And then you say to yourself, well, what are other countries doing? And the report mentions Australia, a number of countries, but a couple for your readers to think about. One is Canada. they've got a capital gains tax, comprehensive one. 1% of capital gains returns to their IRD equivalent accounted for 60% of the capital gains in 1997. So a tiny amount of the population, 1%, resulted in 60% of the capital gains to be identified by their IRD. In the UK, less than 0.1% of returns resulted in 75% of the capital gains tax paid.
Wow.
So it's highly regressive in that sense. A tiny amount of the population pays. So you sort of say to yourself, what's the size of the prize here? Why all this heat? And what sort of revenue would it generate, the taxation generate? And that report thought that between 0.2 to 1.2% of GDP could be collected by the tax. Now, is that worth all the heat to try and get to that outcome, given all the uncertainties over the detail? My argument would be, rather than thinking about increasing taxes on our people, is to focus on what the taxes are used for, which is expenditures. Let's think more carefully about what the current taxes collected is used for. Health, education, social welfare, corporate welfare, whatever it is. Why don't we go through and more carefully target the way we spend our carefully collected taxes and identify rooms for improvement around the efficiency of delivery of government services, which might mean that we get better outcomes or lower taxes.
Yeah, so I understand your views on this, Craig, and I'm sure they are very orthodox as to the reasons why you wouldn't proceed down that line. But I guess what's driving the policy argument is as much polemics and philosophy, yeah? And what I mean by that is that there is a perception that New Zealand has lost its egalitarian principles, and that the rich in fact, there was, I think, a release last week, the rich are gaming the taxation system unfairly. Your response to that? Because the equity and the rich are getting away with it tax argument?
Well, I don't know the source of that information, so I can't comment. I would just rebut, as you do as a debater, Michael, and say, well, half of us don't pay any tax because of working for families tax credit. So is that fair? Is that fair that half the population doesn't pay tax? You could swing the bat the other way around and say, well, actually, it's currently unfair that half of us don't pay tax and don't have the incentive to go into a higher tax bracket by earning more money because they're penalised even more for working harder. So I think the behavioural aspects or the incentive aspects of working for families are pretty poor. People are not encouraged to, because of the tax system, to work harder or take on another job if they can get one. Obviously, in the current climate, it's not easy, I accept that. But nevertheless, if you want to take on additional work, working for families penalises you because you go into a high tax bracket.
Antonia Watson got a bit of a crackback from the Prime Minister. Fair enough, in your view?
Oh, it's great that people are debating it. Thank goodness for that. I mean, 2 years ago, we might not have been able to do this for whatever reason. So it's great that people are asking the questions. And I'd just go back to the primary source of information around the debate that was clearly present in the tax working group, because it was a split group. Not everyone agreed on the recommendations. 3 or 4 dissented with good reason around a slow adjustment rather than the proposals that were outlined. And that's what we need. So when politicians come up with these aspirations, we need to go into the detail and say, what does it actually mean for mum and dad in the regions, or a shopkeeper in Kaiwaka, whatever? What does this mean for them? Do they really want their assets to be taxed in this way? And, the perverse thing is people are not stupid. So if the family home is exempt from capital gains tax, everyone's going to buy a bigger home because you can get a bigger capital gain when you sell it. So house prices won't go down, will they? People will buy bigger homes because there's no capital gains on their family home.
Well, if they can afford it, I think is the answer to that question. But you're saying
all of that
inherently these people can afford it. Yeah, I get you. Yeah, I understand.
The incentive, the tax incentive would be to buy a bigger home.
I've just found that report. It was last year. It was prior to the election. The wealthiest New Zealanders pay tax at half the rate of ordinary people. An IRD report has found. They took the IRD study into the tax rate paid by a sample of 311. That was the base, Craig. Wealthy New Zealanders found they paid a median effective tax rate of 9.4%, compared to the middle wealth Kiwi who paid 20.2%. Is that a problem?
I recall that debate. I think that was instigated by Minister Parker from memory.
It was indeed.
There was a subsequent debate. I apologise, I can't recall the guts of the debate, but there was a subsequent debate around the methodology of that survey and that information, and it was quite widely criticised. So I don't have that information to hand, but happy to come back with.
No, that's fine. It's just that's where that report came from, and it's been resurrected, I have to say, in support of. People like Newsroom, Spin-Off and all those sorts of media organisations who are arguing or buttressing their reporting with opinions on why capital gains tax is a good idea.